It's been 3 years since our divorce was finalized. Beth and I had been married for almost 18 years before our separation. We were high school sweethearts and married shortly after graduation. At that time, we had no other lovers but each other. It made a lot of sense back then. We believed love outweighed sex any day of the week. Of course, you don't realize the depth of this truth until it's too late. We probably led the kind of life that could be called a good life. We had 4 children: Ella, Brad, Alina, and Daryl. We referred to them as the kids alphabetically. After Daryl was born, I had a vasectomy. I figured we didn't need the whole alphabet. Now, Ella and Brad are in college, while Alina and Daryl still live with Beth, my ex-wife. What happened? What went wrong? We seemed like a happy family. We were good parents and supported everything our children did. Like most young couples, we struggled to make ends meet. I worked in a factory, and Beth started working at the local Walmart as soon as the 2 older children went to school. The younger kids went to daycare when one of us wasn't home to watch them. It wasn't the best job, but that's the way things are in today's society. I often wonder how my parents and grandparents managed everything when women didn't work. I don't know who to blame, society or materialism. We wanted a lot of things, and we wanted them too fast. Our love life started out fine, as it probably does for most young people. We were passionate, making love all the time, day and night. But as the children were born, we did it less and less. That's probably how it is in most families. We just didn't have the time, or so we thought. In hindsight, the problem was ourselves. We started taking each other for granted. Our love life became a hurry-up-and-get-it-done affair. We were climaxing, but it wasn't what it used to be. There was no longer the sweat and "I love you so much." In a way, I guess it became boring, but only because we weren't putting love into it. Eventually, I was promoted to supervisor, and our financial situation improved. As the kids got older, we were able to go out occasionally. Dinner and a movie were nice. It put some sparkle back into our somewhat dull relationship. I think all marriages go through this phase where the initial excitement fades and routine sets in. We tried to rekindle that spark, but maybe it was too late. Despite the improvements, something was still missing. The connection we once had seemed to have vanished. We were going through the motions, but the love and intimacy that once defined our relationship were gone. We became more like roommates than lovers. The day-to-day responsibilities took over, and we lost sight of what brought us together in the first place. I often think about those early days when we were inseparable, the laughter, the adventures, the dreams we shared. Somewhere along the way, we lost that. And now, here we are, divorced, living separate lives. Beth is with the kids, and I'm trying to navigate a life without her. It's not easy, but it's the reality we must face. As I reflect on our marriage, I realize that love is not just about the good times. It's about working through the tough times together, putting in the effort to keep the flame alive. We failed in that aspect, and it cost us our marriage. Now, I can only hope that we both find happiness in our separate paths, and that our children grow up knowing that, despite everything, we love them deeply. Maybe one day, I'll find someone new, someone with whom I can build a future, keeping in mind the lessons I've learned. Until then, I'll keep moving forward, taking life one day at a time, and cherishing the memories of a love that once was. You love each other, but you start taking each other for granted. That's exactly what happened with Beth and me. One day, she came home and told me she wanted to go out with the other girls from work. I didn't see any problem with that, since our children were old enough to take care of themselves. This happened about 4 years ago. Beth dressed in slacks and a blouse, looking pretty good. Like many women, she was always worried about her weight, but she looked great no matter what. When she got home, I asked her if she had a good time. She told me she had and mentioned some of the other girls. I didn't have anything against Walmart, but many of the women who worked there were divorced or separated. That didn't strike me as the type of company Beth should be keeping. I told her that, and she got mad at me for belittling her friends. I didn't do anything like that, I told her. It's just that these women will be looking for men, and you'll be with them. She looked at me, a little confused. We'd been together for 18 years. I knew all her moods, and I knew I'd hit a nerve. "Well, have you danced with any of the men?" I asked. She delayed answering, but then said, I didn't do anything wrong. Yeah, I danced with a couple of guys, and that's about it. I suspected more had happened, but I didn't bring it up. She told me that she and her friends were going to get together once a month. I didn't really like that, but what could I say? We'd just have to wait and see. The next month, she wore a skirt and tights. I watched her get dressed. She didn't say anything to me. I told her I would wait for her upstairs. When she walked in past midnight, she looked at me and went to her room to change. As she headed for the bedroom, I asked, You were wearing pantyhose when you left. Where are they? It was hot, so I took them off, was all she said. Beth, this is getting out of hand. We need to talk, I said. She asked me to leave the room so she could undress. I told her that she had been undressing in front of me for 18 years, and I wanted to know what was so special about this night. I walked over to her and took her hand. It was something I had never done before. Please don't, Kaylee. I'm begging you. Please don't. Her voice quivered with fear. Well, I guess that answers the question of why there are no tights, doesn't it? I remarked bitterly. I'm sorry, Kaylee. It just happened. I was drinking at this party, and Joe kept telling me how beautiful I was, and then he kissed me and started touching me. I've never been with anyone but you, Kaylee. The girls kept telling me how good Joe was, and I let it happen. You've had more than one man, haven't you? I asked, my voice trembling with anger. When Joe took me, I was lying on the bed, and then a couple of other guys came in and took advantage of me too. They didn't take you. You let them all have you. Doesn't our marriage mean anything to you? Didn't you at least think of me or the children? Kaylee, I'm sorry. It wasn't love like you and me. It was the best sex ever, and I loved it. Barb, one of the other girls, is married, and she told me that she and her husband like to swap partners. I don't want to lose you, Kaylee. Please go with me once and try it, she begged. My thoughts were scattering in different directions. I told her I didn't want to talk anymore. My mind couldn't comprehend what had just happened. I told her we could talk the next day. That night, I slept on the couch. In the morning, after the kids had left for school, I got dressed and went to work. Beth was still asleep after a rough night. I couldn't focus on work, so I took the day off. I went to where Beth was working and approached her. She smiled at me. She was the cashier that day, and her friend Barb was at the next register. I read the name on her name tag. Honey, why aren't you at work? She asked, her voice filled with concern. I'm going to see Jeff, our lawyer, today. I'm going to get a divorce. I turned and walked out. Behind me, I heard Beth yelling at me to wait. She had a customer at the register and didn't know what to do. She must have been in a panic. I didn't wait. I briskly walked out the door, got in my truck, and drove off. I immediately went to the house and packed up almost all of my clothes. As I drove away, my mind was flooded with memories of our life together. 18 years of marriage, 4 beautiful children, countless memories, all seemed to crumble in an instant. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I couldn't stay in a marriage that had been shattered beyond repair. The betrayal was too deep, the trust too broken. I needed to start anew, even if it meant facing the unknown alone. I put everything in boxes and loaded them into the truck. I had no idea where I was going, but I knew where I didn't want to be. I left a note for my kids, explaining that their mother and I were divorcing and that she could explain everything to them. I'd really like to know how she was going to explain it. She was good at making everything my fault. I ended up going to my parents' house. They were in their 60s and had been married for over 40 years. I told them that Beth and I were separating and would probably divorce. I knew it hurt them because they really liked Beth, and it was probably a shock. I told them I needed a place to stay, and they offered me the whole basement. It had been completely remodeled, and there was a nice bedroom, a small kitchen, and a living room. They said I could stay there as long as I needed. They didn't use the basement anymore. They didn't like the stairs. About 2 years ago, they had moved the washer and dryer upstairs after Mom had her hip replaced. I may get a little confused telling you this story. I have so much to tell you. I know you want to know about Beth, what the children thought, and what the lawyer and a few other people said. I told Mom and Dad that Beth wanted more freedom. It was hard to explain that she wanted to have fun with other people. I didn't want to tell my parents that. I just told them that we felt differently about a number of things and didn't think we could come to an agreement. They weren't happy with that explanation, but it was all I could tell them at this point. I did get to Jeff, our attorney, and he told me that Beth had already called twice. I asked him who he would represent, me or her. She doesn't want a divorce, Kaylee. She thinks you can work things out. Answer my question, Jeff. Are you her lawyer or mine? I asked again. I'm hers, Kaylee. She called me first and I agreed to the case. I'm sorry. If you had called me, I would have been yours. Please talk to her, Kaylee. You're both my friends and I hate to see you both in divorce court. Did she tell you why I left, Jeff? Why I want a divorce? I asked. She said you two had a fight because she went out on a date. She got drunk and cheated on you, he replied. Truth time, Jeff. She went on a date after I told her I had a bad feeling about it. She had fun with 3 men and then asked me if I wanted to swap with her friends. So much for the occasion, Jeff. I'm going to meet Sally Black. We both know she's the best in the business. I'll have her give you a call as soon as we work out a plan. Thanks for everything, Jeff. I turned around and walked out. Sally was the best divorce attorney in the state. She was as tough as they come. I knew several men who had gone up against her, and they had all been brought to their knees. I called Sally, and she set up an appointment for me the next day. She asked me not to talk to Beth until our meeting. I asked her about the kids, and she told me to have my parents call them and tell them we would talk in the next couple of days. My parents called the kids and talked to Ella, our oldest. They told Ella that I would call them and talk to them in the next few days. They said that if any of the kids had an emergency, they should call them. They also told them I would be staying at their house. About 2 hours later, Beth called home. She told my dad that she needed to talk to me. I shook my head, refusing, and my father said that my lawyer had forbidden me from talking to her that day. I would call her after I met with my lawyer. I heard Dad say to Beth, Beth, I don't know what happened between you two, but you must have hurt Kaylee terribly. I've never seen him like this. He talked some more and hung up. He looked at me and said, Beth said to tell you that she loves you and she's sorry for what she did to your family. I was furious. I knew she was going to make it all my fault. Mom wasn't in the room, so I told my dad the truth. I asked him not to tell Mom because it would crush her. She loved Beth. When he left the room, he had tears in his eyes. My father was a rather sentimental man. The next day I went to work. The plant didn't allow personal calls except for emergencies. I told the manager that I had filed for divorce and made sure that no calls from Beth were forwarded as emergencies. I was glad to be working. It helped me focus on something other than Beth. After work, I met up with Sally. She was a beautiful lady, but strictly business. Kaylee, what do you want to have happen here? She asked. Wow, I guess I'm not quite sure. I need to think about it, I replied, feeling overwhelmed by the reality of my situation. Sally nodded, understanding. Take your time, Kaylee. This isn't easy, and it's important to be clear about what you want. We'll work together to make sure you're taken care of. I left her office feeling a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and uncertainty. I knew that moving forward wouldn't be easy, but I also knew that staying in a broken marriage wasn't an option. I needed to rebuild my life, one step at a time. You see, I love Beth. I love her very much, and I probably always will. I don't want to destroy her or anything. I just can't live the lifestyle she wants. I don't want to share her with anyone else, and I don't want to have sex with other people. I'm a little worried about the kids. I know they're all grown up now, but I don't want her bringing all the Toms, Dicks, and Harrys into the house. While I don't think she's capable of that, I also didn't think she'd cheat on me. Sally spoke up. Kaylee, people go through this every day. We can do whatever you want to do. I take it you don't want the affair situation to go public for the sake of the kids. You have to support them, and we can determine the amount. You can give or take whatever you want. You're in charge here. We may have to use the affair as leverage to settle things, but in the end, we'll file under irreconcilable differences. Is that all right with you? You are my lawyer. I'll take your advice, I replied. You're getting a pretty big paycheck right now. Since she's working, We can probably get by with $500 a week in child support. When the kids turn 18, we can kick back $50 a week. There will be no spousal support, and when all the kids turn 18, the money will stop. You will also be responsible for their medical care. As for higher education, it is up to you to decide if you want to contribute. You are not legally required to. Your oldest is 17 and your youngest is 12, so you will have to pay child support for the next 6 years. Are you okay with that, or do you want something else? What about our savings and my retirement package? I asked. All savings will be divided equally, as well as any bills in both your names. You have 2 cars, so each of you can have one. Your pension is exactly that, a pension. We won't let her touch it. The house and the furniture are the only things left. What would you like to do with them? Our house is worth about $200,000. We owe about $60,000, but my children live in it. I have an idea I'd like to pitch to you. In many cases like yours, where you don't want revenge but there are children involved, I suggest that she be allowed to live in the house until the children are grown and out of it. Let's say at the age of 21. At that time, the house would be sold and the money divided equally, or one party could buy the house for half the value minus what is owed on it. She will be responsible for paying half the value of the house. There was so much to go through. Why wasn't I enough for her? 18 damn years wasted. I guess we can live with that. What if Beth or Jeff wants to fight back? I asked. Then we'll pull out the big guns and tell them about the affair, Sally replied confidently. I'm sure they don't want that. And if they do, then we'll ask for custody and to split everything in half. And of course, no child support since she won't have any children. I took the next day off, and Sally called Jeff to say she had a proposal for him and Beth and asked if they could come to her office at noon. Of course, Jeff didn't want to go to Sally's office, but agreed, knowing it was a win-win situation for him. Jeff and Beth showed up at the same time. I figured Jeff had told her to wait for him in the parking lot. We sat at the table, Sally and I on one side, Jeff and Beth on the other. Jeff spoke first. He knew Sally and wasn't happy to be on the opposite side. It's good to see you again, Sally. I know how you work and like to get to the point. Before you make us an offer, Beth would like to talk to Kaylee alone. No, I said. She told me everything tonight. I won't talk to her until after the papers are signed. Everyone here knows why I'm asking for a divorce. I looked directly at Beth. If you are afraid of your private life being exposed, please listen to my offer. I consider it very generous. Sally interjected, Well, that question has been answered. Mrs. Cohen, Kaylee has made you a very fair offer. Sally handed a copy to Beth and a copy to Jeff. He will cite irreconcilable differences as the reason for the divorce. As you can see, he has provided you with a decent income while your children live at home. The only point of contention is the house. I think Kaylee was very fair in his offer here as well. Jeff spoke again. We need time to study this document and think about a possible counteroffer. Sally, I'll talk to Beth and get back to you in the next couple of days. Jeff, just to be clear on this matter, there will be no counteroffer. If you refuse this offer, which I think would be very unreasonable, Mr. Cohen will file for adultery and claim custody of the children and the house. Beth lifted her head and began to cry. Sally was playing hardball, and it hurt to see Beth crying. I loved her, but I couldn't live with the betrayal. I had to stand my ground, for my sake and for the sake of our children. This was the only way to move forward. Beth grabbed the pen and asked where to sign without even reading it. That's when she cried for real. She was terrified of losing her children. Mrs. Cohen, please calm down, Sally replied gently. Kaylee doesn't want to hurt you or the children. Please take a day or so, as Jeff suggested, and see if everything is satisfactory. We may have overlooked something. Forgive my threatening tone, but I wanted to make it clear that we are offering a very favorable arrangement. Kaylee will make sure that you and your children are well taken care of. So please take this document and discuss it with your attorney and Jeff, and we will discuss it tomorrow. Sally handed Beth a box of tissues. Beth picked up a couple of tissues and looked at me while her tears subsided a little. Kaylee, I really do love you, no matter what you think. I was just hoping that some time would pass between us and we could be together again. but I can see that you've already made up your mind. No, Beth, you made the decision for me. You want the freedom to do what you want, and I'm giving it to you. The only thing I ask is that you keep your lovers away from my children, or I will take them away from you. That's a promise." Beth started crying again and hurried out of the building. Jeff said goodbye and told Sally that he would probably see her tomorrow or the day after. Sally looked at me and said it looked like I was going to win this case. I told her that there are no winners, only losers. I had lost the only woman I had ever loved, and my children were now living in a single-parent household. No, we didn't win. We just got a fair settlement. My daughter Ella brought the younger two to my parents' house to see me. I was happy to see them. They kept asking questions, and I told them that their mom and I don't get along, don't agree on some important issues, and we're going to get divorced. I tried to explain to them that their mom and I will always be in their lives. We just won't be together. Daryl, I'll be at your games. I won't miss them. And Alina, when volleyball season starts, I'll be cheering for you in the stands. I will always be a part of your life. I hugged and kissed them all while they told me how much they loved me. I gave them my cell phone number, and of course they could always call me at Grandma's house. Brad showed up a little later. "Dad, I have a question for you. Did you cheat on Mom?" "No, Brad, I would never cheat on your mother. Why are you asking me that?" Jim, my high school buddy, and Travis, our neighbor, said their parents are divorced, and in both cases, their father was caught cheating on their mother. I was hoping you hadn't done something like that. God, I love you, Dad, and I'm going to miss you. Brad, you won't miss me. I'm not leaving the country. I'll always be here for all of you kids. It's just going to take some time to get used to our situation. Chapter 2. Well, the divorce was finalized, and I kept my promise to the kids. I went to most of their school events. At most of them, I saw Beth. She was a good mom, and if she had anything to do, she kept it to herself. I would like to point out that Beth and I have always been on good terms. We got together for our children's birthdays and other special occasions. Our only agreement was that she was not to mention her personal life to me. We talked about kids, holidays, my parents. No topic was off limits, except her personal life. A couple of times she would start saying something about a male friend or something like that, and I would get up and leave. The agreement that Sally and I drew up, we all signed. I wasn't there when Beth came to sign it. Sally told me that Beth took it very hard. We argued with Jeff several times about what credit cards would be paid and by whom. I guess it was his way of saving face. I told Sally that if it came to a fight, I would pay. We canceled all of our credit cards and made new ones in different names. I talked to the kids regularly. They told me that their mom had come to terms with the fact that we were divorced and seemed to be a little happier. I asked them if she was seeing anyone, and they said no. She went out with her friends about once a month. I think I shuddered when I heard that. I never got to have a heart-to-heart talk with Beth. She wanted the freedom to explore everything, and I didn't think so. You can't marry someone and then decide to find new fun things to do. That's the way I was raised. Like I said, my parents were married for over 40 years. Perhaps we got married too soon, and she didn't have the chance to get what she seeks. I never explored the sexual realm either. Despite everything, I tried to remain hopeful for the future. I hoped that one day, both Beth and I would find peace and happiness, even if it wasn't together. Life had thrown us a curveball, but I was determined to make the best of it for the sake of our children. They deserved stability and love, and I was going to give it to them, no matter how hard it was for me. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew that with time, we would all heal and find our way. I was happy with Beth. Going back a couple of years, I'll note that I started dating again. I dated a few women from work. At my age, most of the women I dated were divorced. I made it a rule to never date married women, even if they were separated. I guess I felt it deep inside me. I had sex with a few of these women, but it wasn't the same for me. I mean, it was okay, and I treated them with respect, but I was always thinking about Beth. Funny how you can't just brush it off and move on with your life. I tried, believe me, I really tried. All the women I dated didn't suit me. The best days for me were family holidays when I could see Beth. One night last year, I went out with some guys from work. They said they knew a lively lounge where women hung out. Of course, you know who I saw there. It must have been ladies' night. I looked up, and there she was, sitting there. It was funny, because there weren't any men around them yet. I didn't know any of the women she was with. The only one I'd met at her job was Barb, but she wasn't there. I approached Beth from the side so she wouldn't notice my appearance. "Would you like to dance?" I asked. "Kaylee, what are you doing here?" she asked, surprised. "Just out with the guys." "Are you waiting for someone, or do you want to dance?" I replied. No, I'm not expecting anyone, and yes, I would love to dance with you." "Let me introduce you to my friends," she said, listing half a dozen names. "All of these women are members of our card club. About once every 6 months, we meet rather than play cards, and it just so happens that tonight we are just about to have a dance." "How about a dance?" We went up to the dance floor, and I put my arm around her. "Just like old times, isn't it?" I said. She looked up and smiled, and I pulled her closer. We did 2 slow numbers in a row, and then the band started playing faster songs. "I've never been able to dance to songs like that," I said as I walked her back to her table. She looked chagrined that I had taken her to the table. "Ladies, it was nice to meet you." I nodded to her friends. "I better get back to my friends." When I left, it didn't feel right. I didn't want to see if another man would approach her. I told my friends it was time for me to leave and that I'd see them later. As I walked out the door, I turned around and saw Beth looking at me. The next day, I got a call from her. She said she was happy to see me out and that she enjoyed being around me. She asked if I would help organize Ella's wedding reception. My oldest daughter was getting married. It seemed like just yesterday that I had held her in my arms. Now she was ready to start a life with her boyfriend. It was funny that Beth called the day after I saw her because I knew Ella's wedding was still a year away. I told her I thought it was a little early since it was so far away. She said that reservations and such had to be made in advance. I suggested she call Ella and make arrangements with her. After all, it was her wedding. After they had put their ideas on paper, I would take care of the financial matters. She said that everything was fine and that she would call Ella and get started. I wanted Beth to know that one dance wasn't going to get us back together. I called her about a month later to ask how the plans were going. Alina picked up the phone and told me that Beth had gone out with friends. I was furious, but really had no right to be. We had been divorced for over 2.5 years. I asked Alina if her mom went out regularly, and she said about once a month. I called my buddy Pete and asked if he wanted to go to the lounge. He was also divorced and liked the ladies. We entered the hall, and it was full of people. I saw Beth sitting with a group of people, men and women. I decided to hell with her. I was going to find another woman to dance with. I saw a young girl, probably in her early 30s. She was dressed very sexy, wearing a mini skirt and no bra. Pete said, "Damn, that's great. Check out these girls sitting alone." The girls were sitting with other women dressed about the same. They were only a couple of tables away from Beth and her friends. I was walking towards Beth's table when she noticed me. Her mouth dropped open, and I walked past her table and headed towards the table with this sexy young chick. "Do you want to dance?" I asked her. "Sure, I like older men, especially handsome ones," she replied. I knew she'd said it loud enough for Beth to hear. We stood up, and I pulled her against me. I didn't hold her hand, but I wrapped my arms around her and pressed her breasts against me. "I'm Kaylee, and you're a very nice woman," I said as we swayed to the music. "I'm Rachel, and it's nice to meet you, Kaylee." I was dancing almost in front of Beth's table. As we danced, I couldn't help but notice Beth's reaction. She looked both shocked and hurt. Part of me felt a twinge of guilt, but another part of me felt justified. She wanted her freedom, and now she had it. I was free to live my life too, even if it meant forcing myself to move on in ways that didn't feel entirely right. The night ended with Rachel giving me her number, but I knew deep down that no one could ever replace Beth. I went home that night feeling a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a longing that wouldn't go away. The next day, Beth called again, thanking me for the dance and saying she hoped we could remain friends for the sake of our children. I agreed, knowing it was the best course for everyone involved. We needed to move forward, even if it meant doing so separately. Time passed, and I continued to be there for my kids. I attended their events, cheered them on, and made sure they knew I loved them. Beth and I maintained a cordial relationship, focused on co-parenting. Despite everything, we managed to find a balance. Life was different, but it was moving forward. As Ella's wedding approached, we worked together to ensure it was perfect. It was a bittersweet moment, watching our little girl walk down the aisle. Beth and I stood together, proud of the family we had created, even if our paths had diverged. The love I had for Beth had changed, but it was still there, buried beneath the pain and the memories of what once was. In the end, life goes on. We adapt, we grow, and we find new ways to be happy. I may never fully understand why things happened the way they did, but I know that holding on to the past won't change it. All I can do is look forward and embrace whatever comes next. I held Rachel close and tried not to look at Beth. The men at Beth's table were staring at Rachel's legs, so I pulled up her skirt a bit more so they had something to look at. The next song was a fast one, but Rachel and I stayed on the floor and danced. I knew it would get to Beth, since I had never danced to fast songs with her. When another slow song followed, I grabbed Rachel and pulled her tightly against me, sliding my hands down once to squeeze her buns. She just smiled at me. At the end of the song, I walked Rachel back to our table and told her that maybe we could dance again later. "I'd love to," she replied with a wink. Pete had just returned to our table as well, dancing with one of the girls who had been sitting at the same table as Rachel. I was sipping my drink when I saw her, Beth, approaching our table. Pete, who had never met her, didn't realize who she was until she spoke. "Will you dance with me?" she asked. I looked back at Pete as if she was talking to him. "Kaylee, answer me." I stood up and said, "My pleasure." I turned to Pete and said, "Pete, meet Beth, my ex-wife." Pete's mouth dropped open as he remembered that he had just called her a broad. As we danced, Beth said, "What was that about?" "She was all over you. God, she would have had sex with you right there on the dance floor if you'd asked her to." "Isn't that why we got divorced?" I asked. "Did you want me to make love to other women so you could have other men?" "Kaylee, please, you and I never talked about this. I was wrong." "Look, Beth, you've come home, and all you can say is I was wrong. Besides, we're not married now. When you were partying, you were my wife. My wife, damn it." A guy approached Beth and me on the dance floor and asked Beth what she was doing. "You're supposed to be my date, and you asked this guy to dance?" he demanded. I looked at the weasel and said, "Back off, buddy. You're not getting anything from Beth today." I could see that this made Beth very uncomfortable. "What are you, her husband or something?" he asked. "Yes, I'm her husband, and you're going to the hospital if you don't get the hell away from us," I retorted. Beth started to speak, but I interrupted her. "Do you want to sit with me or go back to your boyfriend?" Beth, beyond furious, pulled away from me and went back to her table. I grabbed the creep's arm and told him that if he tried to have sex with her that night, I would hunt him down and hurt him. Then I let go of his arm, and he slinked back to his table. The two young women Pete and I had danced with earlier came over and sat with us. We moved to a booth and started having fun with them. Those girls had come here that night for one purpose. The little blonde I was with asked if we were ready to leave. She said she was hot and horny. I asked her to do me a favor first. I pointed to Beth, who was sitting there looking angrily in our direction, and asked the blonde to come over and tell Beth that she would get her wish this evening. The little blonde smiled, walked over, handed Beth my message, and walked back. Beth was furious and tried to stand up, but found herself sandwiched between other people. By the time she got up, we had already left. We actually had sex with those two hot chicks at Pete's apartment. In fact, during the night, we even changed partners. The sex was great, but after they left the next morning, I didn't feel complete. I knew what was wrong. There wasn't enough love. I turned my phone off, and when I turned it back on, I had 10 messages from Beth. She was freaking out, calling me every name she could think of. In one of the messages, she said that I had ruined her evening, which pleased me. It was about 9 in the morning when I called her. She picked up, and I asked if she had calmed down. She started ranting again, talking about what a bastard I was and how much I had hurt her. Then suddenly, she stopped. How does it feel, Beth? To know that the one you love is having fun with someone else? That's the life you've chosen? You sleep with whoever you want, and I'll sleep with whoever I want. To hell with love. As I hung up the phone, I heard her crying. I didn't hear from her for several weeks. Then one day she called. Kaylee, can we talk? I mean about everything. I know it's going to hurt you because seeing you with that slut hurt me, and I know what I did was much worse. Beth, it's over. Go on with your life and have fun with whoever you want. I don't care anymore. I just wanted you to feel what it's like. Kaylee, I haven't had sex with a man in 2.5 years. The last time was a month after you left me. It wasn't going well, and there was no love. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had imagined her moving on, living the life she seemed to want, but to hear her admit that she hadn't found what she was looking for made me pause. Yet, I knew that our paths had diverged too far to reconcile. Beth, I wanted you to understand what I felt when you betrayed me, but I think we both need to move on. Our past was beautiful, but it's just that now, the past. Focus on finding what truly makes you happy. I need to do the same. We said our goodbyes, and I hung up, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. It was the end of a long, tumultuous chapter. We had shared nearly 2 decades of our lives, built a family, and experienced both joy and heartbreak. Now it was time to forge ahead separately, carrying the lessons learned and the memories cherished. Life has a way of moving forward, no matter how deeply we may wish to pause and rewind. I knew that I would always care for Beth, but I also knew that our futures lay on different paths. I hoped she would find peace and fulfillment, just as I was determined to do. I realized men just use me like a whore. I'm not a whore, Kaylee. I was wrong. I was really wrong, and there's no way I can prove it to you. I wanted to try to explain it to you, but that's not the life for me. I realized it when Joe asked me if I was his little slut. I slapped him hard across the face. He wanted to hit me back, but I kicked him in the balls before he had a chance. I don't want that life, Kaylee. I want the life we once had. Honestly, 2.5 years. What about that idiot a couple weeks ago? I asked. He said he was your beau. He had every intention of getting you into bed. He was a friend of one of the guys at our table. The other men at the table were with their wives. Since I was the only single woman at the table, he decided he was going to be with me. I wasn't going to do anything but dance with him. Besides, he told me that you would kill him if he laid a finger on me. Is that what you told him? Of course. Should I carry out my threat? Hell no. He wouldn't even dance with me. I only came back to the table because you embarrassed me so badly, and then you sent that slut over to let me know you were going to have sex with her. Didn't you, Kaylee? You had sex with her? Beth, we're not married. I'm free to do what I want. By the way, what happened to your friend Barb? I don't see her with you anymore. They're no longer in the club. She and her husband are divorced. The reason they tried switching was because they thought it would add some lust to their marriage. Her husband ended up divorcing her, and she and the other man's wife left together. 2 other marriages burned down. I thought it was strange that she mentioned the club. She said she hadn't gone there in years. I decided to change the subject. How are Ella's wedding plans coming along? You haven't told me anything about them, and now the wedding is only a few months away, I asked. I know you're aware of all the plans. Ella has talked to you a dozen times. I guessed you didn't want to be here alone with me, so we made the plans and just let you check them out. I'm not afraid to be alone with you, Beth, I said. Yeah? I don't believe you. If you're not afraid of me, then ask me out, she laughed. I don't think that's a good idea, Beth. It might give the wrong impression. People might think we're back together, I replied. I knew you were afraid. You still love me as much as I love you. You just don't want to admit it, she said. Beth, I love you, but the pain of what you did to me still hasn't subsided. I see it every time I look at you. When you cheated on me, you took most of my heart. I don't think it's recovered yet, and I don't know if it ever will. God, I'm so sorry, but there's nothing I can do. Nothing. Kaylee, I'm the one who ruined our marriage. I lost the only man I ever loved. I also live with guilt on a daily basis. I think about killing myself every now and then, but the children would have to live with that. I've done enough damage to them. I had hoped that one day, maybe we would be together again. I didn't know what to think anymore. I had never spoken to her like this, and now I was hearing this. God, my mind was in turmoil. I wanted her. I loved her. I hated what she had done to me and to our marriage. What if she continued with her thoughts? Maybe she's blaming me. I had to know more before I believed her. I knew I couldn't live with it if she killed herself. I thought I knew her well enough to know if she was lying to me, but now I didn't know. I had to find out for sure, but how? We all have thoughts like that from time to time. Thank God we don't follow through on them. I had to tell her something, but what? Beth, I'm starving. Would you like to join me at Red Lobster for lunch? We could discuss what to get Ella for her wedding. For the next 30 seconds, all I heard was crying. It was a deep, soul-wrenching cry, the kind that shakes you to your core. I waited, unsure of what to say next. Finally, she managed to choke out, "Kaylee, I would love that. Thank you." We drove in silence to the restaurant, the air thick with unspoken words and lingering emotions. Once seated, we ordered our meals and sat across from each other, the familiar surroundings bringing back a flood of memories from happier times. "Kaylee," she began, her voice trembling, "I don't know how to make up for what I've done. I wish I could turn back time and undo all the pain I've caused." "I know, Beth," I replied softly, "but we can't change the past. We can only try to move forward and do better." As we ate, we talked about Ella's wedding, the plans, and the excitement surrounding it. For a moment, it felt like old times, and a small part of me dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to heal. But the scars were deep, and I knew it would take more than a few shared meals to bridge the gap that had formed between us. When lunch was over, we walked back to the car. Beth stopped me just before we got in. "Kaylee, I want you to know that I'm going to work on myself. I'm going to see a therapist, try to figure out why I did what I did, and how to be a better person. I don't expect you to take me back, but I want to be someone you can be proud of again." I nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope amidst the pain. "That's all I can ask for, Beth. Just be honest with yourself and with me. Let's take it one day at a time." As I drove her home, I realized that this was the beginning of a new chapter for both of us. It wouldn't be easy, but it was a step towards healing. And maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for redemption and a new kind of relationship built on honesty and mutual respect. Only time would tell. Then a tiny voice said, "My pleasure. Beth, you have to realize this isn't for sex. It's lunch and a little talk about Ella's wedding.